Hello and welcome to another episode of MindShare TV. I'm your host, Robert Martellacci of the MindShare Learning Report, bringing you the latest insights from the world of education. And today we have a very special guest, Glenn Robbins, an innovative educator and author of the inspiring new book, I Won't Back Down, How Educators Can Turn Rejection into Redirection. We're set to dive into some thought-provoking discussions. Stay tuned as we explore how setbacks can be transformed into powerful growth opportunities in education. Glenn Robbins, thank you for joining me.
Robert, it is a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
It's not our first time having you on the show. You just keep producing these books, and we keep having you back.
Well, I'm honored by that, so thank you.
Pleasure. So a little bit about Glenn Robbins is a superintendent of Brigantine School Board, and he is a role that underscores his passion for creating supportive, dynamic educational environments under his leadership. His district has embraced cutting-edge technologies, methodologies, fostering a culture of innovation and inclusive education. Glenn's advocacy for progressive education reform is reflected in his new book. And we're excited to jump into this. Kudos to you. It almost feels like a playbook. I love the stories. You must have been very passionate about reading, and you are truly an amazing storyteller. What inspired this book?
Yeah, so what inspired me was a couple of things. Number one, I love music. I think we all do. And I think I mentioned in the book, music is the best and closest thing we have to a time machine. And what I mean by that, there are some days we hear the lyrics and some days we hear the sound. But when we hear a song, it transports us back to a moment in time. Like you knew you were in that house, or you were driving, or you were working, or you were doing something. It strikes you. So I love the music.
I was going to say, I know every word of Rhinestone Cowboy from the Gong Show days when we performed on stage in high school. And I doing it rendition any opportunity, get birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, weddings, you name it. So keep that in mind.
But it takes you back, right? And it feels that. And there are some good moments and there are some bad moments and times you come through and persevered. And, I work with a lot of aspiring superintendents across the country and so forth in the United States. And a lot of them are beat down. A lot of them are tired. And, same thing for principals and teachers and so forth. And a lot of them along the way, including myself, have been rejected. And that's a question I ask for people all the time. Aren't you thankful you were rejected? Like, how many times did, God protect you in a way or, send you on a better path? You didn't think it at the time, and you were probably resentful at the time and or questioned a lot of things, but it might have been a protection or a redirection to something so much better. And I thought about that as I talked to all these educators, and I said, there's got to be some kind of tie into this. So, and then I read a story about Tom Petty and how Tom Petty, it was one of my first CDs I ever got was Full Moon Fever.
I remember him well.
Right. And the story, he was already renowned, known for being part of the Heartbreakers. He was, I think at that time might have been close to dating Stevie Nicks, if not already doing so and so forth. But Tom Petty put together this awesome album and then took it to his producers and they said, no, it's going to be a dud. It's not going to sell. We're not putting this out there. And then he was totally distraught. And then, sometime later, a good friend of his takes him out to dinner. They're there and there's music. There's instruments up front and says, Tom, let's just go play. Let's go play some of your new songs. They'll uplift them. And unbeknownst to Tom, there's a bunch of producers and directors in that crowd. And they're like, this is going to be platinum. And of course, word got back to his original people and they thought, oh, okay, now it's a great idea. Let's move forward with it. So how many times has that happened to you in your life where you pitched an idea to a boss and they said, no go. And then they come back or they revamp it and then make it their own or whatever it may be. But, you keep persevering, you make it yours. Yeah. And the cool part about it, which I thought, and I didn't realize this till this past summer, was when you Google or YouTube Tom Petty's I Won't Back Down, the person that helped him in this story was George Harrison from the Beatles. And when you YouTube I Won't Back Down music video, right, George Harrison and Ringo Starr are in it playing with him. You know,
That
so
is
again, friends
legendary.
lifted him up in a time of need. How many times do you have somebody that does that for you and
Yeah.
or sees something in you that you haven't seen in yourself yet, and they elevate you? And it just goes on. And I was like, you know what? That's happened to him. Who else has been rejected? And I heard about the Hendrix opening up for the Monkees and the Beatles, and then
Right.
Johnny Cash and Taylor Swift and Toby Keith and Andre Boccacelli, who I loved. You know, like all these different artists.
Another fine Italian.
Yeah. All these different people who I said, you know what, I'm wondering, they're curious if they've gone through, some hellacious moments. And
The
they,
Beatles.
if they were told that there's not going to be guitar bands, imagine if they felt that. Or Elvis fell through on what the Grand Ole Opry head person said, that, you're better off just being a truck driver.
I love the message around Taylor Swift, that story around media literacy and, how she was being chastised by the media and controlling the narrative. Right?
Yes. So how many
Talk
times
to me about that.
Yeah. So how many times do we have to do that in our own professions, right? We have a world that's polarizing on the education system that's constantly trying to denounce it. And there's so many different things that the media or politicians will try to do. But here she controlled her own fate. She controlled her own destiny. She started out in super small venues and so forth, just performing in front of a couple people. I picked Taylor because she vacations in an area near us. She is from Pennsylvania. So
whereabouts? I might have to hang out there next summer when I come down to the ClassLink event.
Yeah, so it was either last summer or the summer before. She was in Long Beach Island, right in New Jersey.
Oh, cool.
She was there for a wedding for a girlfriend of hers. And literally the second she was spotted, the whole island almost sunk because everybody.
Oh, my goodness. I have to say the Jersey Shore is such a well-kept secret. Cape May. Like, I'd never been there till a couple of years ago. I'm such a big fan, so we don't want to tell too many people. Sorry about that.
But anyway, like I said, she pushes her way through her own journey and so forth. And how do we do that? I kind of similar to Toby Keith, a country music star. He was already a big oil rig guy. He was moving up through the ranks professionally. It wasn't something he liked, and for him, he decided, I'm going to go to Nashville. I'm going to put all my money that I have onto a particular record and record it. And I'm going to put it out there myself because no one else is giving me the opportunity. And he did that. So many times in our career that we maybe not happy where we're at. And we say, you know what? I got to invest in myself and let's just take that step forward and see what happens. So,
and speaking of which, in your book, you discuss turning rejection into redirection. Could you explain a specific moment in your career that exemplifies this philosophy and how it shaped the pathway that you took thereafter?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot. The one I'll resonate with would be Jimi Hendrix opening up for the Monkees. And so for the younger crowd, just imagine an electric guitarist or a heavy metal band opening up for a boy band or a girl band, right? Like, it just does not go together. And Jimmy was booed off the stage and multiple times back in 1967, told to quit, all this stuff, that he wouldn't be successful. And instead of quitting, he goes over across the pond to England and then explodes. And I think about this in my own journey, where along the way, I wanted to be a principal and then superintendent. And I was told as an assistant principal by my superintendent at the time that I just don't see you as a principal. I just don't see you as a higher level.
Wow.
And so I think about that moment. Like, if I would have sulked in that and just said, okay, I'm not going to be that way, and I stayed there, what kind of educator would I be today? Who would I be today? And I questioned that. But instead I said, you know what? I believe I can do better. People have told me I could do this job, and I'm going to take a step forward and I'm going to try elsewhere. And I did. And I found the environments that allowed me to become me and thrive and learn in those environments. But if I didn't and I stayed and I quit, almost like Jimi Hendrix did, what would have happened?
Yeah, you know what? It's I'm having flashbacks to my son's grade 8 math teacher saying, Lucas, you're not good at math. You should take general math in grade 9. And he was persistent and maybe stubborn. And today he's a CPA and investment banker. And he wants to run into that teacher and share what he's doing because, maybe she wasn't such a good math teacher.
Yeah. And there's a little math working at the bank and all the stuff that he's doing. Right.
Right. And he works at a bank. That's the,
me. Yeah. So I look at it in
Crazy.
that regard, like it was, and then I also look at it like I was turned
Yeah.
down from other positions, from applying and so forth. And man, was that a blessing that I didn't realize at the time, like that turned out to be a disaster or something worse. So it turned into a redirection, something better. But it was a big mindset shift.
Yeah. Well, and brilliant. So education often involves facing numerous hurdles, as you know, on a daily basis. From your experience, what are some of the common forms of rejection educators face, or how can they adopt a mindset of a redirection mindset?
That's great. Great question. I think that people need to start looking at sometimes rejection is a great thing. It is a great turning point. If you had everything go right for you, would you truly be successful and keep pushing forward? Sometimes you need to be challenged. Sometimes you need to be pushed back.
Right.
Sometimes you need your ego checked, and then do a true reflection. And I think we don't do that enough. I think we do not sit down and reflect on our day. How are we as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as whatever it may be, as an educator, we need to do that more and say, all right, maybe they're teaching me something here. Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. And I need to become, like you said with yourself, a little more perseverance, a little more resiliency. I got to maybe step up here and there. And I think that's something I see. As far as rejections, people try and look for new jobs, right? The market is crazy right now, whether people cut for budget cuts and then trying to find a new job. So they're being told no. And a lot of times people don't realize that, sometimes you're being told no because they might want a different sex for the hire. They might want an internal person. They might want somebody in more diversity than you. They might be hiring a friend that has nothing to do with you or a board member's friend. So I think it's part to have those conversations on why you weren't doing successful at the interviews. How many times do you go into a boss and pitch something and the boss says, nah, I'm not sure. So then you got to think about how can I make my pitch better? What am I missing on a point that I want to make better in a program that the school could run? So too often we put our blinders on and think about what we just think is right. Whereas we go to the boss or the school board or whoever it may be, we need to think about so many other things that we sometimes neglect.
Well said. Your approach places a strong emphasis on resilience. For educators who are feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, what strategies would you recommend to foster resilience and that persistence and mindset?
Yeah, I think it takes time to learn that. I think number one, you need to have a good mentor or two or three or four.
Absolutely.
Or as many as you can get. I remember going up to people and I'm like, hey, by the way, you're going to be my mentor now. Like even if I can call you whenever, just to speak to me. And I had multiple when I was coming up through the ranks as a principal. And I was blessed by that. I also think that, it goes back to the reflection. Like in the book, at the end of every chapter, I have your write your own lyrics section. And it's asking you some pretty crucial text questions in regards to a deep ego gut check. Like, are you truly doing the things that you think you could be doing well, if not better? So that reflection for you to actually write it down, that's a good therapeutic thing to write out and speak about it with a mentor, write it out for yourself to think back about it. I'd highly encourage that. And then I'd reach out to many other people on social media. That's how you and I link up. Learn from others, I think, is a very crucial thing that people sometimes forget to do. We're all human. We've all been through rejection. And when you call somebody and say, oh, yeah, I've been let go from here, or I've had this situation, it elevates you because they persevered and got through it too. So there's no ending to it.
You shared a point that it struck a chord with me, pun intended. Get it? Struck a chord. Your music theme book. I was at an ERDI event, and there I'm sharing your cover, and hopefully folks can find it online and have a listen or a read. So it was Dennis, and I forget his last name. He was just retiring, and he was on a panel, and he looked a little long in the tooth. He was actually in his 80s. And I said to him afterwards, I said, Dennis, how long have you been a superintendent? And he said, 55 years. You know what I'm talking about, from Minnesota?
Wow, I believe I do, yes.
Yeah, and I said, Dennis, what motivated you? and to
After 2 years.
and what you said earlier, what could I do better, was what he would walk into the office at the start of the day thinking right off the get-go. What could I do better? And that's what I do. I mean, I have that growth mindset instilled in me, but now it's more intentional, and it's at the start of the day. How does that resonate with you? Because it's, you can create a whole series of these books. I mentioned Michael Jordan, who was rejected as a high school basketball player from the high school team. You could do a series on superintendent rejection, athletes, right? You could. I'm coming up with a whole series of books for you. Perhaps in retirement, but sorry, I digress. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're spot on to that. First off, 50 years in superintendency is amazing. They do not make them like that anymore, especially in today's society. But think about the amount of lives he's changed. I look at it from the lens of like a designer. Every time I walk into my school, the district, I'm like, how can I make this better? Am I truly serving the kids that they need to be served? Am I truly serving the families and the staff to be where they are? We have successes, just like you mentioned the Bulls, right? They won championships and then they won another one and another one. How do you do that? To your point, how can I get better? How do I continue to improve? I think some people are just so easy to get into that comfort zone and that lazy zone, where I think in the fiber that you and I have is, we're not done. We can do more. We've made it this far. You know what? Why can't we do a little bit more? Why can't we push the teachers or push the kid to do things at a higher level? Robert, I have 5th to 8th grade kids who are doing their own podcasts, who are interviewing people all over the country and internationally. We pushed them to do that because they wanted to do it. And it's an ungraded class period. But if I didn't say, how do we keep getting better? And we just stayed with traditional education.
Brilliant.
They wouldn't have those opportunities. And I think about that. It's like a constant reflection. I did this year, that season's over. What's next season? You're a hockey guy, right? Like, who are we bringing on the team? How are we going to improve the team with training? How are we going to get better?
I really believe that the Toronto Maple Leafs have made me the most positive person I could be, because we haven't won a cup in over 50 years. And I think we're on the
Flyers fan, my friend. So if it makes you feel any better.
You had your share in the 70s. We haven't won since the 60s. Speaking of the 60s, Dennis Peterson is now retired with over 50 years experience, 52 years as a superintendent, starting his career in 1967.
It's amazing.
In Minnetonka, Minnesota.
Yeah, and that district did some very impressive stuff.
So you have a long ways to go, my friend.
I'll try to catch up. I have a 5-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son, so I might be for a little bit.
There you go. Technology plays a significant role in modern education. How do you see technological advances like AI helping educators to better deal with rejection and redirect their efforts?
Yeah, great question. Hey, why don't you ask AI? I did bad on the interview. Here's how I answered. What would you answer differently? Just take a stab at it as a reflection piece and so forth. I think too, when it comes to, using different types of AI systems, why not put it in and have it speak to you? Create cheat sheets based on board policies and regulations that are across the district you're applying to, or whatever it may be, or look up something and have it digress into it. Use it to your advantage as an assistant, not as a cheat, but as an assistant to help you grow. And I think that's the same thing for our staff, right? Like when we talk about it, we use AI in all of our classes, and plus we have an AI class as well.
Cool.
I'm into. Yeah, cybersecurity in 8th grade, and it's also a cybersecurity AI class. But we have 3rd graders all the way up to 8th grade. They're using AI in their classes, ELA. But they use it as like our ELA class. You wrote your story out, put it into AI, and see how it would edit. Is it going to be the same as the teacher? Could you like the suggestions that are given to you, or do you not like the suggestions that are given to you? Why? So it's a constant thinking and constant questioning process, like trying to get people into.
Thank you for that. So Can you perhaps share a story, because you're such a great storyteller, from your book where an educator used a setback as a launch pad for innovative teaching or leadership?
Okay.
I didn't want to throw a curveball at you, but
All right. I'm going to look at it like, oh boy. And how it keeps evolving, right? You said an educator setback, but keep
right.
evolving.
Yeah.
So I mentioned Miles Davis in the book.
Yeah.
Right.
Another great musician.
Right. So Miles, like some other musicians throughout the years, Bob Dylan was also criticized when they started changing their sounds. They started changing, who they were as artists, right? They're evolving. And
Jazz, right? Jazz.
Miles is constantly putting out a different album, but with a totally different sound to it. And it irked some people because it wasn't the same. He was comfortable enough, like we talked about earlier. Are you comfortable enough to keep putting it out there, ignoring the critics who will not be around, but your work will be? And how do you continue to put work out there? You're focusing on what you can control. And that's what he was doing. He was putting out different records that he could control, that he was happy with, and that he kept evolving as an educator. And I think that's a great story for all of us. Just because you hit stardom, why not keep evolving? And Miles Davis did that.
Brilliant. Looking to the future. This is a bestseller already. Congratulations. What are your hopes for this book, how it will impact the educational community? What changes do you hope to inspire in schools and among educators who happen to pick this book up?
Yeah, so what I'm hopeful for is that any educator, regardless of your title, this book's for you. As I mentioned, all types of different stories in there and different scenarios and tips, and then obviously reflection pieces. My hope is that, in today's day and age, there's such a focus on mental health, right? Social emotional learning. And educators are in the thick of that each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
And the one recurring theme that I kept getting back from a bunch of endorsers and a bunch of people who read the book is I felt like I was having a conversation with a friend who helped me get through some situations. I had a couple people literally DM me and say, "Hey, did you write this about me? Like, you know my life that I struggled with these?"
Cool.
So I think my hope is that, it helps push you through. You have that conversation in the book with a friend, that guides you and tries to lift you up. And you also realize that some of the greatest musicians of all time were equally, if not worse, rejected than you, denounced or whatever, and they still succeeded. So turn off the negativity vibes that you're hearing on social media and or the actual media, whatever it may be, about how education is not doing your job. Focus on what you can control. Focus on the great things that you're putting out daily in a classroom, or as a paraprofessional, or as a bus driver, or as a principal, or a superintendent, or a board member, or even a volunteer in a school. You're making a huge difference, whether you realize it or not. And a lot of times we forget that because we just let that negativity sink in, and we forget that we can make a huge positive difference.
Well said, Glenn Robbins. Such an inspiring conversation today. Final thoughts to share.
Final thought to share. My friend, I hope you are well. I hope all of our friends are well out there because, like I mentioned, it's a chaotic world right now. We have a lot of different things going on wherever you may reside.
We'll save that for another show.
But my thought is
Geopolitics 101.
Yeah, my thing is very simple. Maintain the positivity. Continue to think about what you can control, what you cannot control. You control your effort, you control your attitude, you control what you do on a daily basis. You can't control everything else. And if you can remember, so many other people have been in your seat before and hit worse times than you, and they've risen up, then you need to push through in that head and say, I can do the same thing.
With that, Glenn Robbins, thank you so much. Absolutely enlightening talking with you today. Your book not only offers practical advice, but also serves as a beacon of hope for educators facing challenges. Thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us. For our listeners, I Won't Back Down is available now, and it is a must read for anyone in the educational field or beyond to turn their challenges into stepping stones for success. Thank you for tuning in to the MindShare TV episode today. Remember to face rejection. There's always a path in redirection. Keep pushing forward and never back down. Until next time, my name is Robert Martellacci, and keep the learning curve steep.